Hello, Third Hour. Last week, you guys spent some time reading articles and watching videos that gave you the big picture of World War II and some of the major players in this war. Today, we're going to dive into the details, and we're going to start with the setting the stage part of World War II, the years of 1918 to 1938. For those of you who are history buffs and know that World War II was from 1939 to 1945, you might be thinking, Mrs. Gatlin, this is not part of World War II. But it is what gets everything ready for World War II. And that's what we're going to be asking ourselves today. How is it that just 20 years after the horrific experience of World War I, we're all at it again and doing the same thing at an even worse scale with twice as many casualties? To start today, let's look at two key questions. These key questions are kind of wrapping up everything you saw in those videos and articles with what we'll talk about today, and will be what's featured on your assessment when we end the World War II unit. So just to put your mind at ease about the assessment, you can read the email to see some more details about that. But remember, you're going to know what the assessment involves far in advance, and you'll have lots of time to ask me questions or get my feedback before you have to turn anything in. However, that being said, you should be taking notes now, and all of your daily assignments are helping build towards that. So please make sure that you're doing them and that you're asking questions along the way, not just waiting until right before that's due. Okay, so the first question you want to focus on is, why did each country involved in World War II join? That's basically the question, how did we get in another world war? This doesn't make sense. And number two, why was Hitler able to rise to power so easily? People think all the time, he was a psychomaniac. How did a whole country of people follow him? We're going to see how he wasn't always the way he seems now in our imagination. And because of other things going on in the world, he was able to get away with a lot more then than he might have been at a different time in history. So with the vocabulary you'll need for this unit, these are some words that will really help you be able to talk about what's going on in the world at this time and get us started with the major ideas. These words on this slide that you're seeing right now are the ones that you're going to use for today's assignment, which should be listed in your assignment plan. So I'll show you an example of that and what you have to do. I would suggest taking a blank piece of printer paper, folding it into 6 boxes like you see here, and then using 1 box for each vocabulary word. As you can see, I promise I am not grading you on your artistic talent, because I have none. Stick figures are just fine. The idea behind this assignment is to get you to really process what the word means and to just have a quick visual to reference it. So getting back to those vocabulary words, on this slide I have gone ahead and bolded what is the key word in each definition. If you're using the note guides that were in RenWeb for you to download, this would be a great time for you to highlight or circle those words. Starting with the first word, totalitarianism, the key word here is control. Okay, and totalitarianism has a definition right in the word. It is not just control, it is total control. Okay, and it's when a party or a leader totally controls every part of the lives of its people. A common example used for this is modern day China. You literally can't post something on the internet or even go on the internet without government permission. That is controlling people's lives. Totalitarianism can be combined with these other types of basically governmental structures that are used throughout the world. So just because something's totalitarian doesn't mean it's not also fascist or communist. They can be combined. The second key word is militarism. And of course, right there, the root word, and also here bolded, the key to this is military. These are countries who believe that if their military is strong enough, they can get power that way. And we know that even the United States believed in militarism at one time. Back, if you remember, when we studied with Teddy Roosevelt and the Great White Fleet and how he sent them all throughout the nation to basically prove we have the guns, don't come against us. That's a form of militarism. And militarism is going to be used to an even more extreme extent in World War II. Fascism is a radical form of nationalism. The word nation is your key word in here, where you believe, and as you see at the end of the definition, a certain group, usually your nation, is the best, that you are better or above other groups, and therefore you deserve to be in control. Communism, on the other hand, has to do with people having things in common. Okay, again, root words will really help you with these. And it means you eliminate private property. In other words, no one owns anything by themselves. You all own it together. The problem with that is that so far this theory has never worked out, because in every country that's tried communism out, a government comes in that decides while everyone might own everything in theory, they're going to tell them how to use it. And that usually doesn't go very well. Russia, which is who you see noted here on the slide, was the first country to try this. And so we're going to see how they're dealing with that during the World War II era. Now, democracy is what you've heard a lot about the United States. The government is controlled by citizens, and that's in our case through representation. However, we can still do things like have militarism or annex. You have seen that, and you're going to see that word a lot in World War II. Many of the issues in World War II is one country annexing or taking over another country by force. And even America has done this in its past, if you remember Hawaii and how we took over that. However, in World War II, some of the countries aren't just going to take it like Hawaii did, and that's where you're going to have issues. Okay, so let's move on to the major countries involved. Okay, the first three we'll talk about are called the Axis powers. Axis powers are usually the ones you hear about that were the bad guys because we were the allies, so they were obviously against us. So in our history books, that's how they're seen. And the Axis powers involved Italy, Germany, and Japan. You should see this in your notes about Italy, and I'm going to be clicking through some slides with pictures to kind of give you more information about these that you can add in. Okay, so Italy was disappointed with the Treaty of Versailles. If you don't remember, the Treaty of Versailles is what ended World War I. So you can see here from that time period a newspaper. And Italy wasn't disappointed the war ended. They were just disappointed that they didn't get as much as they wanted out of the end of it. And what they had wanted specifically was more land. However, they were told, no extra land for you, you're good, the war's over, be happy. That, along with no work, because they were going through their own Great Depression, just like us, leads them to have some pretty unhappy people. And when you have unhappy people, you usually have revolutions. So that's what happens. The communists and fascists fight it out, and the winner was Benito Mussolini. Mussolini was a fascist dictator. That's why in your notes there's an arrow from the word fascist to Mussolini. He came in, and this is basically what he promised: work and protection for everyone, fixing every issue Italy had, and restoring the glory of Rome. That was one of his favorite things to say, basically bringing the idea of the Roman Empire back. He used a lot of violence and a lot of force, and he got some things done, but he's known as a pretty ruthless dictator. That was seen rather early on when he decided to invade Ethiopia. So as you can see, the year on this newspaper is 1935. So right when we're going through our Great Depression, and we're kind of focused on that. The newspaper headline says, Ethiopia appeals to the League of Nations that America had started after World War I, but then didn't join. Yeah, so it wasn't very effective because we weren't part of it, so we didn't really help out. We were kind of busy helping our own people, and poor Ethiopia wasn't helped. But the point is, people started to look at Italy as a threat because Italy was going around invading people, and that's never a good thing, especially when those people ask for help. This is one of the reasons why when Hitler starts doing things, they don't seem so bad, because Italy was already having troubles. In Germany, and again, this is what should be in your notes at this point, the German people are also going through issues. Big part of that was World War I. Okay, the word reparations there in your notes means that they were told you had to pay back damages. And not just any damages, but all the damages for all the things that happened in World War I, which was really a crushing amount of money. And not only that, but they were told also your army has to demilitarize. Okay, so basically you have to limit it to 100,000 people, no more subs, tanks, or planes, and no more troops in the Rhineland. That's the area where they had marched into Belgium from. So their army was taken away, and they were told you have millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. As you can imagine, that leads to a Great Depression like ours. But their Great Depression was much worse. $1 at this time was worth 1 trillion of their dollars. 1 trillion. That means their money was worth nothing, basically. The picture that you see here is children playing with the money because it was useless. You literally couldn't buy anything with it. And so they had to go back to a bartering economy. They were trading each other goods because they couldn't pay for anything. Their money meant nothing. Now, as you can imagine, they were looking for someone to help, and the person they found was Adolf Hitler. In his book, Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle, he promised he would work and protect everyone, fix every issue, which he happened to think were the Jews and the communists most of all, and restore the glory of Germany. Does this sound familiar? Yeah. Okay, so he also happens to be in jail while he writes this. Side note. But when he gets out, much like Stalin, he actually rises to power. And the reason why is that he had some sound economic advice. So even though he was a little bit crazy on the anti-Semitism, okay, going against Jewish people and the communists, people were like, but his economic ideas sound good. And the president of Germany gives him a job as chancellor. He does such a good job that in 2 years, he became president of Germany himself. And that's when he really began to be in charge. This is in 1935. He then starts to fix the economy, and he does a great job. He says, let's give people work by doing massive public works projects. He does. Now, those of you who have seen some History Channel documentaries might recognize on the left is Hitler, and on the right is FDR. And the reason I put them side by side, even though it's a little bit controversial to do that, is in the same year, they're doing the same thing, and it's working in the same way. Hitler wasn't throwing people in concentration camps when he first came into power. He was giving people jobs and fixing the economy and doing a really good job at it, a lot like our president at the exact same time. So this is another reason why he wasn't seen as a threat, especially by Americans. Now, how was he getting ready for the war, though? He was actually loaning some guns and tanks and airplanes to the Spanish. Now, if you remember from a few slides back, he's not supposed to have guns and tanks and airplanes. But the thing is, he said, oh, we're just building them and selling them to make money in the Spanish Civil War. And what he was really doing was practicing and improving those tanks, which is why when he actually invades people a couple of years later, he does such an amazing job and takes so many countries in such little time. But at this point, it doesn't look like they're really for him, so people are okay with it. Now, there is one thing he did at the end of the time period we're talking about, which is 1938. He did go ahead and invade Austria and what's called the Sudetenland down here, which is Czechoslovakia. You might think, okay, well, now people are realizing that he's bad, like they thought Italy was bad for invading down in Africa and Ethiopia. But the thing about it was that when he went into Austria, they kind of welcomed him. And when he took over the Sudetenland, it made sense. Did I mention Hitler was Austrian? Yeah. So when he did that, they weren't really surprised. And he just said, hey, the Sudetenland was part of Germany before World War I. We're just taking our land back. So again, it didn't seem that bad. The people weren't too upset. He hadn't killed anyone or really fired any shots. He just kind of walked in and took over. And as you can see over here with the Munich Pact, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and Italy had a meeting and all agreed, what you're doing is okay, Hitler. So again, he doesn't seem like much of a threat. Japan, however, was seeming like a huge threat, and again, distracting people from Hitler. They were having their own economic depression, and they had annexed or taken over Manchuria and then attacked China in what's called the Rape of Nanjing. As you can see here, Manchuria is a pretty big area that they took over. And then over here, Nanjing is in China, and as these pictures show, it was a pretty horrific event. 200,000 civilians were killed, really just for the sheer fact that they could kill them. It was a horrible time with beheadings, shootings. When you're thinking of who was looking really terrible in 1935?